Hello, thanks for joining us here on Civil War Rarities for Season 1, Episode 1. Sit tight and enjoy the next episode, Blind Luck.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Civil War Rarities Episode 1, Blind Luck, the tragic case of General Felix Zollicoffer. In the annals of the American Civil War, there are countless stories of bravery, strategy, and tragic fate. But few are as peculiar and poignant as the tale of Confederate Brigadier General Felix Kirk Zollicoffer, a man whose career and life were cut short not by superior tactics or overwhelming force, but by something far more mundane: his inability to see clearly. Felix Zollicoffer was born in Tennessee in 1812, and before the war, he was a respected newspaper editor, politician, and public figure. He was the son of John Jacob Zollicoffer and Martha Kirk. His family of Swiss descent came from North Carolina, where his grandfather was a captain in the Revolutionary War and was granted land in Tennessee as payment for his service. Interestingly, he was married to Louisa Pocahontas Gordon, and yes, she was a direct descendant of Pocahontas. Louisa and he had 14 children, but only 6 survived infancy. Before the Civil War, Felix worked for the Mercury newspaper in Huntsville, Alabama, and in 1836 volunteered to serve with the Tennessee militia during the Second Seminole War in Florida. Afterwards, he became an owner and newspaper editor in Tennessee and active in the Whig Party. Felix eventually served in the Tennessee legislature and even represented his state in the United States Congress. When the Civil War broke out, Zollicoffer, like many Southern leaders, resigned his position and took up arms for the Confederacy. Despite having no formal military training, Zollicoffer was commissioned as a brigadier general in July 1861. This wasn't unusual for the time. Both the Union and Confederate armies were desperate for leaders, and political connections often trumped military experience. Zollicoffer was given command of Confederate forces in eastern Tennessee, a critical region that served as a gateway between the Deep South and the border states. But here's where our story takes a turn. General Zollicoffer had a serious problem that would prove fatal. He was extremely nearsighted. In an era before corrective surgery or even reliable eyeglasses for many people, this was a significant handicap. For a military commander expected to survey battlefields, identify enemy positions, and make split-second tactical decisions, poor vision was potentially catastrophic. Zollicoffer's vision problems weren't just a minor inconvenience. Historical accounts describe him as being so nearsighted that he couldn't recognize people's faces from even a short distance away. Imagine trying to command troops in battle when you can't clearly see what's happening more than a few feet in front of you. It's almost impossible to fathom how he could effectively lead soldiers under such circumstances. In the fall of 1861, Zollicoffer was ordered to defend the Cumberland Gap and prevent Union forces from advancing into eastern Tennessee. He established a position near Mill Springs, Kentucky, setting up camp on the north bank of the Cumberland River. This decision itself was tactically questionable, but he was short of rafts. By positioning his forces with the river at their back, he left his troops with limited options for retreat if things went badly. As winter approached, Union forces under General George Thomas began moving toward Zollicoffer's position. On January 19, 1862, the Battle of Mill Springs, also known as the Battle of Logan's Crossroads, began. It would be one of the first significant Union victories in the Western Theater, and Zollicoffer's poor eyesight would play a devastating role. The battle took place in foggy, rainy conditions, which made visibility even worse than usual. For a man who already couldn't see well, this was disastrous. As the fighting intensified, Zollicoffer rode forward to rally his troops and assess the situation. But in the confusion of battle, the fog, and his own visual impairment, he made a fatal error. According to multiple historical accounts, Zollicoffer rode directly into Union lines, apparently unable to distinguish between Confederate and Union forces, since both sides were wearing blue uniforms at the time, and the visibility was poor. Some reports suggest he actually began giving orders to Union soldiers, believing them to be his own men. When a Union officer, Colonel Speed Fry of the 4th Union Kentucky Infantry, realized who Zollicoffer was, he called out to him, but it was too late. Zollicoffer was shot and killed, reportedly by Colonel Fry himself, though accounts vary. The general died instantly, becoming the first Confederate general to be killed in combat in the Western theater of the Civil War. He was killed alongside his aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Bailey Peyton. Captain J.A. Vaughn of Fry's regiment was an eyewitness to this event and reported the general was wearing a white rubber overcoat, unbuttoned, a blue Federal Army cap, and a double-breasted blue Army officer's coat, and when the top buttons, if unbuttoned, displayed in a side pocket the top of a willow flask. A field glass was slung from a leather strap on the outside of his rubber coat. He says that Federal soldiers quickly picked over the general's body, cutting the buttons from his coat, removing nearly all of his clothing, such that when it came time to prepare his body for burial, the surgeon had to get him new clothing. He had 3 bullet wounds in his body. His death threw his troops into confusion, and the battle quickly turned into chaos. The Confederate forces fled across the Cumberland River, abandoning their camp, supplies, and artillery. Zollicoffer and his aides' bodies were placed in expensive burial cases and remained in Federal hands until the end of January 1862. They were seen as a war trophy visited by many. 49-year-old General Felix Zollicoffer was buried in the Nashville City Cemetery on February 3, 1862. The newspaper, the Nashville Union, reported that the funeral procession was composed of a military escort, Governor Isham B. Harris, and head of executive departments, the Senate and House of Representatives of the Tennessee legislature, military members, and citizens in carriage and on foot. The Battle of Mill Springs was a significant Union victory, and it helped secure Kentucky for the Union cause. But it's hard not to wonder what might have happened if Zollicoffer had been able to see clearly. Would he have recognized the danger? Would he have avoided riding into enemy lines? Would the battle have ended differently? Zollicoffer's story raises important questions about leadership and qualification during the Civil War. Here was a man with no military training and a severe physical disability for battlefield command, yet he was given responsibility for thousands of lives and a crucial military position. West Point and Annapolis had strict 20/20 vision requirements for this reason. His appointment reflected the desperation for numbers of men and political realities of the time, but it also highlights the human cost of such decisions. Even his enemies recognized the tragedy of his death, a man who had served his cause with dedication but was ultimately undone by circumstances beyond his control. Today, Felix Zollicoffer is remembered as a footnote in Civil War history, unknown to most, but very popular at the time, especially in Tennessee. Union soldiers referred to him as Snolligoster, an old he-devil at the time. Zollicoffer's story is a cautionary tale about the importance of being physically and professionally prepared for the responsibilities we undertake. His story reminds us that sometimes the smallest details, like the ability to see clearly, can have enormous consequences. The Battle of Mill Springs itself is often overlooked in the larger narrative of the Civil War, overshadowed by more famous engagements like Gettysburg, Antietam, and Chickamauga. As we reflect on General Zollicoffer's odd and tragic case, we're reminded that history is shaped not just by grand strategies and sweeping movements, but also by individual human limitations, bad weather, and simple misfortune. Felix Zollicoffer couldn't see well, and that one fact may have changed the course of battles, lives, and ultimately history itself. This event is definitely a Civil War rarity, and we hope you've enjoyed joining us today.
Hey, well, that's our first episode. Bill, what'd you think?
I thought it was pretty interesting. Poor Lieutenant Peyton. How many lieutenants have been caught in that position before? Hey, sir, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Shut up and let's do it anyway.
You know, that's a good point, though, because the episode discusses Zollicoffer having vision problems, but makes no mention of the 8. Now, obviously, unfortunately, they were both killed, so we'll never know. But it leads me to believe that there's probably a little more to it than just Zollicoffer's, nearsightedness. If you look at it, we know that they had a number of factors. They had fog, mist, maybe a little bit haze, just terrible mornings, and it was in the morning.
Yep.
So I don't know how much residual light they had. It obviously wasn't high noon.
No.
And then, and I think one of the other things too is we know that Zollicoffer was wearing blue and a white duster and a blue kepi. So chances are there were other Confederates, especially probably in Zollicoffer's circle, and maybe to include his aide, who were dressed very similar in blue. That's not what you think of when you think Civil War. You think blue and gray.
Yeah, you do. But, also got to remember this is October or January of 1862. July 1861, Battle of Carthage, Missouri. There's Union troops wearing gray uniforms, and there are Confederate or Missouri State Militia troops that are wearing blue and gray. First Battle of Manassas, there are Confederate troops wearing blue. And then you go to August of 1862, or 61 rather, Wilson's Creek, Missouri. Again, Missouri troops wearing, Confederate troops wearing gray and blue, and Union troops wearing gray from the state of Iowa, regiments up there. The war at this point, there's no continuous supply. They're still trying to get everything shook out with the quartermasters and kind of figure out where things are at and how they're going to get their troops dressed. And so they're using stock of equipment taken and captured at various points, and through the federal garrisons and different things like that. So it's not surprising. So they kind of get things kind of straightened out and figured out. So, yeah, it sucks.
And that's a good point too. If you watch like Gods and Generals at the beginning, when they show Stonewall Jackson all the way up through Manassas, he's wearing blue still. Obviously he was an Army officer, or a U.S. Army officer, and he resigned his commission. Right. He still kept it. And I think even the scene where he brought in Jeb Stuart, Jeb was also wearing blue, straight out of Texas coming in. Yeah,
and Stonewall had been a professor at VMI, so he was wearing the Union blue there, or Federal blue there, and Jeb Stuart comes up from Texas, committing dragoons out there, and he comes straight to Virginia, and yeah, it's not surprising he's still wearing blue.
We didn't have time in this episode to really go over it too, but this episode with Zollicoffer's death brought up a whole new topic as to how do you deal with dead officers in particular of the other forces. We know if anyone wants to go out there and research a little more and look into it, you will see that Zollicoffer and his aides' bodies were displayed more like a circus show. You know what I mean? And nobody really
kind of reminiscent of the old West photos. When desperados would get shot down, like the Cole Youngers at the Northfield, Minnesota raid. They got them laid out and taking, see the little flash photography and the photography, and they're selling carte de visits, to people as little souvenirs.
And it was interesting too, because Zollicoffer and his aide, they were both, I'm assuming it was a collection of officer money that went into it, but they were provided nice caskets.
Yeah.
Obviously that didn't happen much and didn't happen again. And then towards the end of the war, it was simply, carnage machine. That just wasn't afforded.
It's absolutely crazy that, a commander on the battlefield's got such bad eyesight that, he pays with his life for it and drags his poor young aide along with him. And
I'm just glad, at least now, even if, we don't have political appointee generals, whatnot anymore, and everyone still has a pretty good, strict, regimented entry criteria when it comes to medical. So at least we got that. We learned those lessons.
Yeah. Well, for the most part, that's true. I had a West Point classmate that was missing surprisingly enough, he lost it when he was, I kind of asked him about it one time, lost it when he was a teenager or a younger kid, and he could still shoot, shot expert with it, but he used his middle finger to pull the trigger. He couldn't use his index finger, but he still got the appointment, so it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and very interesting. Obviously, that didn't debilitate him, but I couldn't find any references of Zollicoffer wearing glasses ever. And I don't know if that was a personal prideism thing or maybe he just secretly had it. But really, without glasses, there's no correction on nearsightedness.
No, there's not. So. There's not. And I never had glasses when I went to West Point, but it wasn't until I basically went blind trying to read at school in the dark because we had to be in bed by a certain time.
But it was great that when this lesson with Zollicoffer did bring us enough material where I think we're going to go for episode 2. We're going to go into dueling.
Yeah, because you got a little history there.
Yeah, a little history with dueling in Zollicoffer. So tune in next month as we look at dueling, whether it be a little bit before or during the U.S. Civil War.
Yeah, absolutely.
All I got. Thanks for joining us today. Please like, subscribe, and share this with all of your friends who enjoy Civil War history. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we'll see you next month.